Well, today I have the very special honor of speaking with Dr. Russell Moore, who is the Editor-in-Chief and Public Theologian at Christianity Today. Dr. Moore previously served as the president of the Ethics and Liberty Commission, the public policy arm of the Southern Baptist Convention. Dr. Moore is the author of several books, including The Courage to Stand, Facing Your Fear Without Losing Your Soul, Onward, Engaging the Culture Without Losing the Gospel, and The Storm-Tossed Family, How the Cross Reshapes the Home. Native Mississippian, Dr. Moore and his wife, Maria, are the parents of 5 sons. Well, welcome to the summit, Dr. Moore.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, I just want to reiterate what an honor it is to meet a fellow just believer in Christ and a role model of mine. I've enjoyed your book, Onward, years ago, because I love thinking about the gospel and culture. And since then, I've watched you practice what you preach and write. I've seen you be an advocate to those who have been abused in every way by church leaders. I've seen you have the courage to stand up to the president of the United States, even, and Christian nationalism. I've seen you challenge your own denomination when you were with the SBC. Right, your life has been marked by courage.
Well, thank you.
And now you are a prophetic voice in our culture, speaking to others who have been disillusioned by the church and what's going on in politics. You are a trustworthy guide helping people to find their way, which is, we live in very confusing times right now. And we'll get to it in a little bit, but type 4s are the best at helping people navigate through the darkness, navigate through disillusionment, which leads me to your new book. And so you're coming out with a brand new book, I think in August right. 1st, right?
Yes, August 1st, yeah.
It's called Losing Our Religion, an altar call for evangelical America. So I'd love for you to talk about what your new book is about and why those watching might want to read it.
Well, the reason I wrote the book is because I'm encountering something new in terms of my ministry. When I first started out, there would be a lot of people who were walking away from the church. That's the case in every generation. But it usually fell into one or two categories. Somebody either would say, I can't believe what the church believes. I think the church believes too much. I can't believe that Jesus came back from the dead, or I can't believe in virgin births or miracles or whatever. And so they're walking away. Or people who would say, I think the church is too strict. I don't like the church's morality in some way or the other. And so I'm walking away. Now, I almost never hear that. Instead, I hear from a lot of people who are at the point of walking away, not because they can't believe what the church teaches, but because they don't believe the church believes what the church teaches. And so if you look at several of the crises going on right now, whether the political idolatry, the Christian nationalism, the sexual abuse crisis, the scandals that we've seen over the past several years in really remarkably bad ways. The underlying all of that is the idea of the church being used as a means to an end. And that's really what I'm addressing here, is how do we move forward as a church without just replicating all of the mistakes and traumas we see around us right now. And I think there's a way forward.
I love it. Well, we'll make sure they can go out and pre-order the book right now on Amazon, correct?
Yes, it's there. Yeah.
Okay. So make sure to go grab that. Again, Dr. Moore, you have displayed courage. You're not just a guy who writes books, but you have been in the trenches. And so you're the perfect voice for us to listen to, a perfect guide for us to help us figure out how to move forward. So I can't wait to get that book. And you can go pre-order it right now on Amazon, and I'll put the link below the video. All right. Well, this is in the context of this summit. Now we're talking about the Enneagram, and today, should Christians use the Enneagram? And there's an Enneagram debate in some circles about whether or not Christians should even be using it. And so I found it very fascinating. I think I saw a YouTube video of you talking about it for about 10 minutes or so a few years ago. And I was like, oh, that's really great to hear that you are using the Enneagram or have used it and are okay with using it. And so I just wanted to ask you, as a public theologian, as the editor-in-chief of Christianity Today, what are your thoughts? People want to know, what are Russell Moorth's thoughts on Christians using the Enneagram?
I think it's a helpful tool for me. If you don't want to use it, don't use it. And so it's one of those things. It's similar to, I remember, say, 15, 20 years ago, when the debate was whether or not Christians should read Harry Potter. I think the arguments against reading Harry Potter are kind of silly because they would apply just as much to Tolkien and Lewis and many others. So I have no problem reading Harry Potter or having my children read Harry Potter. If you don't want to, don't. Yeah. And I think when it comes to the Enneagram, if it's a tool that you find helpful in terms of understanding other people, great. If you don't, fine. Find some other way to be able to understand the differences of the people around you. So I wouldn't say I'm an enthusiast saying everybody needs to take an Enneagram test and everybody needs to spend time thinking about these things, but I found it helpful.
Great. Yeah, you've done a lot of thinking about engaging culture. And as you know, a lot of people can become black and white and label things good and bad. Like the Harry Potter books are just easier. It feels safer to label something as bad and just stay away from culture. Yeah. But I remember reading a quote from J.K. Rowling that said, "I've never met a child who's read my book that's gotten into the occult or witchcraft."
Right.
And right. I think there's just a lot of fear mongering that goes on with the Enneagram and other cultural goods. And we just got to kind of call that. Like, I don't know anybody who has joined the occult or gotten into the New Age because they've used the Enneagram. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, you've said publicly that you most identify with being an Enneagram type 4. That might come as a surprise to some people. I don't know. It was to me at the very beginning when I heard that. Looking back at your former post as the president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, I might have guessed you were a type 1. You had, one of your big themes was integrity, working for integrity, for goodness, doing the right thing. And so I would have guessed type 1. You were really, seeking broad reform within the denomination. You still are. But that's the beauty of the Enneagram. It focuses more on motivation than on outward behavior. And so please give us a glimpse of what it's like to be a type 4. Like, what do you like being about a type 4? And what is challenging about being a type 4?
I don't know that I could really describe what's challenging about being a type 4 or what I like about being a type 4, because I'm not sure that I would be able to compare it to to something else, because I mean, obviously we only know ourselves from the inside out, so it's hard to it's hard to know. So there are some things that are just sort of normal and natural for me. For instance, my wife is sometimes just mystified that I have Spotify playlists of melancholy songs. And for instance, when I lost my dad, I've got a playlist of songs about dads and about fatherhood that I listen to even now, 2 years later. And her response to that is to say, "But why would you do that? Wouldn't that make you feel sad?" And my response is, "Yeah, and it's great." And so she can't really understand that part of it. But I don't have anything to compare it to. it's I think when you talk about Enneagram ones and integrity, I think there's an equal concern for integrity among most fours, a sense of what is real, of what is authentic, of not simply using words as tools or ideas as tools, but getting at what's really there. I think that's an emphasis there with fours as well.
For sure. And fours go to type 1 in health. And so,
yeah,
and borrow that desire for, integrity that ones tend to embody really well, our model for the rest of us. And another thing that I think is a 4 and a 1 theme, excuse me, is wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
Especially fours can easily spot what's missing, what's off, and say, here's what's missing in the church. Here's what we need to be whole. Mm-hmm. And so I think Pete Scazzaro is identified as a type 4. And as you look at emotionally healthy spirituality in his book and his resources, I see a lot of type 4s being very prophetic in our culture by kind of getting us away from the shallowness that's in a lot of churches and bringing that wholeness and that integrity. And so I think I see a lot of type 4s being very prophetic in our culture right now.
And I think one of the reasons for that is because there's a sense of the ways that either ors can be destructive and life-taking. As we know as Christians, there are some things that are, if there's a both and instead of an either or, there's real trouble and disaster. So it can't be both Jesus and Mammon, both God and Baal, those sorts of things. But in many cases, the real danger is replacing the either and with replacing the both and with or the either or with a both and, or vice versa. And so you can end up with a situation where a lot of times what happens is in the church or in our personal lives is we look at something that's gone bad or something that's gone wrong, and we've assumed, well, the opposite of that is the answer to it. And so if I came out of legalism, the answer to it is antinomianism. Or if I came out of a real chaotic sort of background, the answer to that is authoritarianism and legalism and so forth. And you have to have people who are able to say, no, wait, there are ways to get us off balance or to break us apart that can come in multiple different directions. And so often it's not just, we'll identify what's bad or what's wrong, but identify how we could overcorrect for that. And I think that's a key part of it as well.
Wow, that's fascinating. I think it was in Dynamics of Spiritual Renewal. I believe in that book, it showed, Christianity in the 1900s on of how we swing on pendulums. And you can see that in politics. You can see that in the church of swinging from fundamentalism over to progressive gospel and then back and forth. So I really like that comment about warning us about overcorrection as well.
And you can often see that even with people. Sometimes there are people who will be highly anxious and agitated about something. And if you really spend time talking to them about it, you realize what they're looking at is something they experienced in the past that they don't want to repeat, and often rightly so. But they're seeing that in front of them right now, even when that might not be the challenge facing them. It might be something completely different. And so they're guarding against it, but they're guarding against it in the wrong way.
That's good. Is your new book trying to get people not to overcorrect and go too far on the deconstruction path?
Yeah, because with deconstruction that's a word that really doesn't mean anything because people use it to apply to everything from people who are saying, look, I'm going to take apart all of the faulty things that I've been taught and that I just took for granted. And I'm going to go through the process of figuring out what's real. What do I really believe, and what have I just sort of inherited without thinking about it? Some people mean that when they mean deconstruction. Other people mean I'm going to walk away from God altogether when they say that, and almost everything in between. So I don't really like to use that word very much. Instead, I would say having the right kind of disillusionment. I think we're at a point right now where one of the really difficult things within the church, or at least within the American evangelical wing of the church, is that sometimes the healthiest people spiritually and emotionally right now are the most disillusioned, and some of the unhealthiest people are the most enthusiastic about their place in the church. Well, what I would like to say is choose your disillusionment. I'm not saying choose not to be disillusioned, because the illusions are real. And the first step to health is to drop those illusions. But it is to see in that, what were the expectations that we had that we shouldn't have had, and then what are the ways that institutions and people really have leveraged sometimes religion for at best sometimes selfish and manipulative ends, and at worst for abusive and soul destroying ends. Let's identify that so that we can stop perpetuating it, and so that we can do something different. I mean, I think that the disillusionment can be a moment of clarity, and actually can bring us more in conformity with Christ's likeness rather than away from him.
I well said. And I like that your book, and just who you are, you're a safe place, and I want to create safe spaces to talk about disillusionment and the way forward. And that's really, really needed, because I don't think a lot of people have had permission to talk about their disillusionment. And you said that the healthiest people can become disillusioned. And as a pastor, I've felt that as well from 2020 on, especially.
Yeah.
Well,
and it's not necessarily cynicism, but that's a real danger, is that we can give ourselves over to cynicism of various sorts. I mean, one kind of cynicism just says, okay, well, this is what the church is, and this is what people expect, so I'm going to lean into it. And then we become hacks. Another kind of cynicism can, having been hurt, we can try to protect ourselves by kind of numbing and walling ourselves off from spiritual realities or community altogether, in ways that will harm us. That will end up harming the people who are trying to do it. So we can avoid that cynicism, and it's hard to do when, I think all the time about a friend of mine who teaches he teaches high school boys Sunday school, and he said, it's really hard because all it takes is for one kid who's kind of jaded and cynical to come into the room. He doesn't even have to say anything. And it just causes everybody else to kind of shut down, because it then feels corny to engage. And the more I thought about that, that's not just a high school reality. That's true. That's so true right now, everywhere.
Well, I love that conversation. I want to go back to the melancholy playlist, which was fun to hear. I'm a type 3 with a heavy 4-wing. And so I also was listening to melancholy playlists on Spotify yesterday. And just one suggestion for a playlist is there's some playlists that have cinematic remixes of pop songs, and so it's more like it's like a movie soundtrack. It's very like dramatized, and those are really fun. So just a suggestion in case you're looking for something else to listen to.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did a SWOT analysis for every Enneagram type with strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And here are some of the threats. I would love to hear which one you feel like is a pet peeve of yours. So these are threats for type 4 that can lead to conflict if you're not aware of it. So the first one is it can be a pet peeve for 4s when others are shallow or inauthentic. The second, when others don't recognize your significance. Third, when others don't try to understand you. Or fourth, when others say, cheer up, it's not so bad. Do any of those tend to, are any of those a pet peeve for you?
I suppose the only one that really would be the first. Okay. There is I tend to become irritated internally, not externally, but internally with cliches and slogans that don't really mean anything. That especially, I don't think I would if you're dealing with something that's really not significant. But if you're dealing with something as really important as, say, the mission of the church or American democracy or something along those lines, or a family, those sorts of things, if it's something that's really important, then having slogans that people don't really believe, but they say, is often really irritating to me.
Thanks for answering that. In our last minutes or so, what are a few examples of that the Enneagram has helped you navigate relationships in your family, with your coworkers recently? What are some ways that you've found it helpful?
Well, it's helped me a lot with my children because I'm able to ask further sets of questions. So, for instance, I have a 9 who I think ordinarily I might just think, oh, well, he's low maintenance. He's okay with everything. Because if you were to say, where do you want to go on vacation, or where do you want to go to dinner tonight, or something like that, his response is always going to be, I'm okay with whatever. And he's never going to. So I have to know that and know how to work harder so it's not that I say, oh, he doesn't really care. It's that he's not going to impose that on anybody else. So if I want to really serve him, I've got to do some extra digging to find out what that is. And so that's really helpful with him. It's also helpful in terms of work, with knowing the kinds of not just skill sets, but personalities that I need around me to complement what it is that I do. So I can know there are things that I can do that God's enabled me to do, but that means there are a lot of other things that I can't. And so I really need. So when for a long time, my 2 closest colleagues, staff members, were an 8, a very healthy 8. So not a jerk. And I don't think you would even really think he's an 8, but he is. An 8 who's somebody who really is, okay, I'm going to charge into the conflict and work that out. And a 3 who was super organized and thought in terms of systems and structures and so forth. And it worked really, really well because not only did I not expect them to feel like me or think like me or create the way I do, but I also was able to that was a plus. the fact that they were able to bring strengths that I don't have to that. And again, it was a situation where with both of those, they're very healthy. So it really wasn't much of I have to deal with the downside of those things. But I couldn't have functioned without, not just without them in terms of who they are, but also without them in terms of the way that their points of view and outlooks on the world were structured.
I like that it not so much helped you in terms of managing conflict with them, but also, helping you to have chemistry and figure out how to work with them better. I love that. And I love the story about your type 9 son, because that's a great example of, you could just be passive or sort of distant, just let him do his thing, but it helped you to realize, I need to ask more questions and do some more digging to really draw him out. So I love that.
Yeah, I have a 6 too. I have two sixes actually. I have 5 sons, but I have 2 of them who are 6s. And I had to realize there are a lot of times when I would say, here's something that just came up in the news about an unidentified aerial phenomenon that's been shot down somewhere over Alaska. Nobody knows what it is. All right, let's go to bed. And my wife would say, "You're freaking Taylor out," because he really needs to know, okay, here's how this is going to be okay.
My wife is a type 6, so she loves X-Files and UFOs and aliens.
yeah.
That's so great. And then your wife Maria is a type 2.
She's a 2, yeah. Right. Yeah, and she's sort of the Platonic archetype of a 2. Okay. So there's no real question about where she is on the Enneagram.
Has it helped you at all, knowing that she's a 2, or just helping to realize some things that you didn't realize before?
Yeah, because what I realize is that sometimes when I think that I'm helping her by sort of taking away some way that she's helping or serving, and I think that she'll be really glad to have that time back. I have to realize if I don't do that the right way, she's going to hear that as, well, you don't like the way that I was doing that, or you don't want me to show my care and love in that particular way, which is not what I'm intending. So it's helped me to know that in order to love her better.
Yeah, that's great. Well, one last question. I just know, having a strong 4-wing myself and, battling inadequacy, battling disillusionment at times in ministry, how in the world have you, as a type 4, been able to go through what you've gone in terms of, the criticism from those within your own denomination, getting beat up on social media? How have you grown a thick skin as a type 4 and not thrown in the towel and given up? Like, how's your experience been, in light of being a type 4?
I've never been beat up on social media because in order to be beat up on social media, I would have to be looking at it. And I don't. I look at the people that I follow. I have social media set up where I see them, but I realized a long time ago, I really can't operate being constantly worried about what random strangers think. because if I did, then what's going to happen is I'm just going to be paralyzed by that. And so what I have to say is I have to do and say and think what I believe Jesus would have me to do and say and think. And I have to have people around me whose opinions and so forth I respect on their own terms in order to go forward. I can't do that with random strangers without just trying to become everything to everybody in a way that would become nothing at all. So I just don't see that. And I don't really, I have friends who actually sort of enjoy that kind of thing. And, they will, I've had to say to a couple of them, hey, I actually don't. So I know you might think, oh, this is hilarious that, some rando said that I'm the devil somewhere. You might think that's hilarious about you, but I really can do without it. So my friends just don't do that. So it doesn't. I don't get beat up that way.
No, that is great advice for fours, but also for everyone to how to cultivate gratitude and cultivate a healthy way to lead and not expose yourself to those things that Satan could use to take you out of ministry. So that's brilliant advice. I know for type fours, sometimes it's hard. It's easy to hold on to the negative, to the criticisms, and it's easy to let the encouragement from others slip through your fingers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I have who knows how many notes of encouragement have been given to me in ministry throughout the years, most of which I've forgotten. But I remember the little note that someone sent in 15 years ago in a church I was serving as pastor that said, you always look to the right side of the congregation and you never look over to the left side. And I remember like, really? Is that what? But I still remember it in 2023, something that happened in 2008. And so, I just have to remind myself of that. And it's not, sometimes people will say things like, I really appreciate your ministry. I know everybody else hates you, but I really like you, or something along those lines. Like, that's not helpful for me. Yes. Maybe it would be helpful for some people, but not for me.
Well, thanks for giving us that, inner look into your life, because that's really helpful. People don't realize, when it comes to repentance and faith for a 4 is you have to believe. You have to actually believe the encouragement that's coming your way, rather than just dismiss it as, well, if they really knew me or really knew the real me underneath, then they wouldn't say that. So it just sort of invalidates the encouragement. Whereas no, those are gifts from God. Yeah. And so it's like an act of faith to say, thank you for saying that. I need that. I'm going to put it right here. And, thank you, it's challenging. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Moore, for this conversation. I really have enjoyed it. I want to point people to follow you and your resources. So I know that you have the Russell Moore Show, right? That's one of your podcasts. Mm-hmm. And I just saw you interviewing, let's see, who were you interviewing yesterday? Rick Warren. Rick Warren, I saw a clip from that. So they can go, you probably can subscribe anywhere you can get podcasts, right? The Russell Moore Show, just look it up. Okay. Yeah, I'll put a link below as well. And also the Bulletin is a podcast for Christians seeking insights into the events, questions, and people that are shaping their world. So that's is that with Christianity Today?
Yes, they both are. And the bulletin is with my colleague, Mike Cosper, who some of you might be familiar with from the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill series that he did. And every week we look at what's going on in the world and have a good time talking about it.
Awesome. And make sure to go check out all of Dr. Moore's books on Amazon, but make sure to pre-order the new one coming out, Losing Our Religion, an altar call for evangelical America. You can also find all things Russell Moore at russellmoore.com. You can also find him on Instagram at Russell Moore, and Twitter at Dr. Moore is his handle over there on Twitter. Anything else you'd like to say or point people to, Dr. Moore?
Well, just really glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, to those watching, make sure to go listen to the other amazing interviews that are being played today. I talked with Brian Lee, who's an ordained pastor who has a ministry for those helping those who have been spiritually abused. We talk about religious trauma and church hurt. Also today, I'm talking with Dr. Todd Wilson, who's the president of the Center for Pastor Theologians, on the Enneagram debate in the church, and his debate with Marsha Montenegro on the Enneagram, who's an ex-astrologer on YouTube. And I'll also be showing a video lesson from my new Enneagram history course about the claim that Claudio Naranjo received the Enneagram from a spirit or demon. So go check that out. But then thanks again, Dr. Moore, for helping us to learn the Enneagram through a gospel lens so that we can see God transform our lives and our relationships. Thanks again for joining us. And for those watching, I'll see you in the next interview.